Today I'm going to give you a brief introduction and history of cognitive psychology. The outline of today's talk will involve defining cognitive psychology, the topic's focus and relationships to other scientific fields, the domains of study, the assumptions of the knowledge processing approach, the timeline of cognitive psychology, what was the cognitive revolution? Was the cognitive revolution really a revolution? And the shift in the core assumptions of cognitive psychology over time. Defining cognitive psychology. There is a broad definition, which includes the empirical investigation of the mental events and knowledge involved in recognizing an object, having an idea, understanding a sentence, solving a problem. The more specific definition of cognitive psychology includes the empirical investigation of the mental processes and activities used in perceiving, remembering, and thinking, as well as the act of using those processes. The main topics of cognitive psychology include perception, language, attention, memory, problem solving, decision making, judgment, and intelligence. The core focus of cognitive psychology is information, its acquisition, processing, and storage, as well as converting information into the all-important knowledge. The relationships of cognitive psychology to other fields. Cognitive psychology is a subset of cognitive science. It's related to the fields of neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics. The domains of study. Human experimental psychology asks the question, how do people perform certain tasks? We look at reaction time and accuracy as people are engaged in memory, attention, problem solving, and language. In computer science, we ask the question, can algorithms think like people or even better than people? Artificial intelligence is involved in problem solving through learning, and this may or may not resemble the cognitive processes that humans use. In computer simulation, the same type of technology, artificial intelligence, is employed to simulate human thought processes. In neural network models, the properties and connections of neurons are modeled. Finally, in cognitive neuroscience, we ask the question, can we infer cognition from the brain? One way we might do this is to look at the effects of brain trauma on cognition, either by looking at patients with brain damage or temporarily disrupting brain function in healthy individuals, such as by using transcranial magnetic stimulation. We might also use indirect measures of brain activity, such as positron emission tomography, which might look at certain neurotransmitters in the cortex, or the electroencephalogram, which looks at the electrical activity of the brain, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, which looks at overall brain metabolism. The assumptions of the knowledge processing approach. Environmental information is processed by multiple systems: attention, perception, short-term memory. The systems alter information in predictable ways. The goal of cognitive psychology is to specify the processes and structures that underlie cognition. These can be revealed by time and accuracy measures. The single most important assumption of the information processing approach is that humans are active information processors. You may or may not be actively processing this talk right now. We'll see. The timeline of cognitive psychology. In 1879, Wilhelm Wundt uses introspective methods to report the contents of consciousness. In the 1880s, Hermann von Ebbinghaus studies forgetting as a function of time. When you first learn information, you know it all, but over time, if you don't practice, you start to forget it. In 1904, William James proposes functionalism and other key cognitive constructs. Functionalism is the idea that human cognitive processes serve a function, allowing humans to adapt to the environment. Before 1950, the main theory was behaviorism. All methods that do not involve the direct observation of behavior are excluded, and this pretty much limited us to the study of learning. In 1948, Tolman, a behaviorist, discovers that rats trained to run a maze develop an internal representation of the behavior called a cognitive map. From 1950 to 1970, the cognitive revolution begins. Viva la revolution! First use of the term cognitive psychology. New models and methods are proposed. For example, in 1956, Miller proposes the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. And in 1957, Noam Chomsky proposes the language acquisition device. In 1967, Ulrich Nesser publishes the first textbook on cognitive psychology, naming it, wait for it, Cognitive Psychology. What was the cognitive revolution? A period of time I refer to as 1950 to 1970. It was the accumulation of a lot of factors. It began with a dissatisfaction in behaviorism. Behaviorists did not believe we needed to examine the human mind. Only observable behaviors were required for study. In addition, there was the convergence of several fields to meet the demands of World War II, and then the ever-necessary improvements in technology. These three factors grew together to create the cognitive revolution. But was it really a revolution? No. Behaviorism and cognitive psychology have coexisted throughout psychology's history. However, there was a shift from the dominant mode of thought from behavioral psychology to cognitive psychology. Behaviorism. Organisms respond to the environment. Cognitive psychology. Humans are active information processors. Was this shift good or bad? It was bad. Because in fact, both assumptions are correct. We respond to the environment whether we want to or not. But we are also active information processes. It is a combination of these two processes overall that allow us to engage with the world. You can't eliminate one and exclusively study the other. So let's get out there and think.